I knew my own signature. 40 years of signing academic papers, grant applications, and property documents had made it as familiar to me as my own face in the mirror. But the signature on the document Sarah had just handed me across her desk wasn't mine. "Robert, when exactly did you sign this?" Sarah Mitchell asked, her voice careful, professional. She was wearing her reading glasses, the ones she only put on when reviewing serious legal documents. We'd known each other for nearly 20 years, ever since she'd helped my late wife Elizabeth with her estate planning back in 2005. Sarah never looked concerned without good reason. I set down my coffee cup on her desk. The view from her 23rd floor office in downtown Toronto stretched out behind her, the CN Tower, visible in the late afternoon November light. "I've never seen this document before in my life," I said. Sarah leaned back in her chair. "That's what I was afraid of. Robert, someone submitted this codicil to your will 6 months ago. It was filed with the provincial registry in May. It names Michael as your sole executor and primary beneficiary, completely overriding the provisions you made for the University of Toronto Engineering Scholarship Fund and the Heart Disease Research Foundation. My son, Michael, a corporate lawyer himself, or he had been, before the firm let him go last year. He'd told me it was a mutual decision, that he wanted to start his own practice. I'd believed him. There has to be some mistake, I heard myself saying, but even as the words came out, I was studying the signature again. It was good, very good. Someone had practiced this. The way I crossed my T's, the slight flourish on the R, the way the chen ended with that characteristic upward hook. If I hadn't known with absolute certainty that I'd never signed this document, I might have believed it was real. "The notary stamp is fake," Sarah continued. She pulled out another document from the file. "I contacted the notary whose seal appears on this codicil, Agnes Wu. She's been retired for 3 years, and her seal was reported stolen from her office during a break-in back in 2022. Whoever did this was sophisticated enough to know they needed a real notary's credentials, but sloppy enough to use one who's no longer practicing." I felt something cold settling in my stomach. Not shock exactly, not yet. More like the sensation I'd had years ago when I was still teaching at U of T and I'd catch a student cheating on an exam. That moment of recognition before the emotion hits, when your brain is still processing the mechanics of the betrayal. "Sarah, I came here today to update my will because of Emma. Emma was my granddaughter, Michael's 8-year-old daughter. I wanted to set up a trust fund for her education. How can someone have already changed my will without my knowledge? They can't. Legally, this codicil is worthless. The forgery, the stolen notary seal, none of it will hold up in any court." She removed her glasses. "But Robert, someone went to significant effort here. This wasn't impulsive. They researched retired notaries. They practiced your signature. They understood enough about estate law to make the document look legitimate on its surface. Michael is a lawyer. He would know how to do all of this." "Yes." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "He would." I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, people were hurrying along Bloor Street, bundled against the cold, heading home from work. Regular people with regular problems. Not people discovering their only child had attempted to steal their life savings. $8 million. That's what Elizabeth and I had built together over 42 years of marriage. Her salary as a cardiac surgeon, my professor's income, careful investments, the sale of a software patent I'd developed in the 90s for medical imaging technology. We'd been frugal, practical. The money was meant to fund research that could save lives, to help talented engineering students who couldn't afford tuition, and yes, to take care of our family. But on our terms. With purpose? "What do I do now?" I asked, still looking out the window. "First, we file a police report. Document fraud is a criminal offense. Then we invalidate this fake codicil officially, and I'll help you create a new will with enhanced security measures. We should also look at putting your assets in a trust structure that Michael can't access or challenge. He's my son, Sarah." "I know." She came to stand beside me at the window. "Elizabeth was my friend. I was at your house the night Michael was born, remember? I brought you both that terrible casserole. Despite everything, I almost smiled. It was pretty terrible. I want to believe there's an explanation. Maybe someone stole his identity. Maybe this is a misunderstanding. But her voice said she didn't believe that any more than I did. His daughter calls me every Sunday, I said. Emma. She tells me about her piano lessons, her friends at school. Last week she asked if I'd come watch her in the Christmas concert. I said yes. My voice cracked slightly. How do I look at my son now, knowing he tried to do this? Sarah put a hand on my shoulder. One step at a time, Robert. Let me make some calls. I have a colleague who specializes in financial fraud. Just to be thorough, we should have him examine your bank accounts, your investment portfolios, make sure nothing else has been compromised. That's when it really hit me, the scope of what we were discussing. This wasn't just a forged document. This was my son, my only child, the boy Elizabeth and I had raised, attempting to systematically steal everything we'd worked for, everything his mother had worked for before she died. Elizabeth would be devastated, I said quietly. Yes, Sarah agreed. She would. But she'd also want you to protect yourself. You know she would. I turned away from the window and looked at Sarah, really looked at her. She was 63, sharp as ever, wearing the same no-nonsense expression she'd had when she'd argued Elizabeth's position on medical malpractice reform at our dinner table all those years ago. She'd been Elizabeth's friend first, then mine. She'd held my hand at the funeral 5 years ago. She knew our family. She knew Michael. Do you think he's done this before? Tried other schemes? I don't know. But Robert, you need to consider the possibility that this isn't the first irregularity. It's just the first one we've caught. The room felt smaller suddenly. I sat back down in the chair across from her desk. When Elizabeth got sick, when the lung cancer diagnosis came, Michael was finishing law school. He was studying for the bar. We paid his tuition, his rent, everything, so he could focus on passing. We wanted to make it easier for him. You were good parents. Were we? Or did we make him soft? Make him think money just appears when you need it? Robert, don't do this to yourself. You can't explain away something like this with parenting choices. This is calculated fraud. This took planning. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing it and accepting it were two different things. I need to see him, I said. I need to hear him explain this. That's not advisable until we've filed the police report and secured your assets. Sarah, he's my son. I'm not going to hide from him. I'm going to look him in the eye and ask him why. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. If you're determined to confront him, at least let me be present, as your lawyer. And we do this at my office, on neutral ground, not at his home or yours. Fine. And Robert, don't tell him what we know until I'm in the room with you. Promise me. I nodded. But inside, I was already planning what I would say. How I would ask the question that no father should ever have to ask their child. Did you try to steal everything from me? The meeting was set for Thursday, 2 days away. Sarah called Michael's office and told his assistant that we needed to discuss some urgent estate planning matters. Professional courtesy between lawyers. No details. Michael agreed immediately, which somehow made it worse. He was eager to meet, eager to discuss my estate. Of course he was. Those 2 days passed in a strange fog. I went through the motions of my retirement routine. Morning coffee at the Second Cup on Bloor, reading the Globe and Mail, afternoon walk through Queen's Park. But everything felt hollow, performative. I kept looking at my phone, at the photos I had of Michael. Michael at his law school graduation, his arm around his mother, both of them beaming. Michael holding baby Emma for the first time, that expression of terrified joy that all new fathers have. Michael at Elizabeth's funeral, standing beside me at the graveside, his hand on my shoulder as they lowered her casket into the ground. Which version of my son was real? The one in those photos? Or the one who had practiced my signature until he could forge it perfectly? Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I got up at 3 in the morning and went to my study. Elizabeth's medical books were still on the shelves, exactly where she'd left them. I'd never had the heart to pack them away. I pulled out her copy of Gray's Anatomy, the one she'd used in medical school, and opened it to the title page where she'd written her name in that confident, flowing script. Elizabeth Zhang, 1979. Before she was Elizabeth Chen. before she was Michael's mother. Just a 22-year-old woman starting her journey to becoming one of Toronto's best cardiac surgeons. "I don't know what to do," I said to the empty room, to her memory. "Tell me what to do." But of course, there was no answer. There never was. Elizabeth had been gone for 5 years. The lung cancer had taken her in 4 months, aggressive and merciless. Michael had visited her every day in those final weeks at Princess Margaret. He'd held her hand. He'd told her he loved her. He'd cried at her bedside. Had he already been planning this then? Had he looked at his dying mother and thought about the money? Or had something changed in him after she died? Had losing her broken something in him that I'd failed to see? Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, snow threatening in the clouds over Lake Ontario. I dressed carefully in my good suit, the charcoal gray one Elizabeth had helped me pick out for academic conferences. I wanted to look professional, composed. I wanted to be the Robert Chen who'd published 47 papers in engineering journals, who'd mentored hundreds of students, who'd been married to a brilliant woman for 40 years. Not the frightened old man who couldn't understand how his son had become a stranger. I arrived at Sarah's office at 9:45. Michael was already there, sitting in the reception area, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered and smiled. "Dad, good to see you." He stood to hug me, and I let him, mechanical, studying his face for signs of guilt, of nervousness, of anything. But he just looked like Michael, 40 years old, starting to gray at the temples like I had at his age, wearing an expensive suit that I'd probably helped pay for with a loan I'd never asked him to repay. "Thanks for coming on short notice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Of course." Sarah said it was important. "Estate planning, right? I've actually been meaning to talk to you about that. Now that Emma's getting older, we should probably look at setting up some educational trusts. Maybe discuss long-term care arrangements for you as you get older." Long-term care arrangements. As if I were senile. As if I couldn't manage my own affairs. Sarah appeared in the doorway of her office. "Robert, Michael, please come in." We settled into chairs around her conference table. Sarah had files laid out, legal pads, her laptop open. She looked every inch the senior estate lawyer, completely in command of her domain. "Michael, thank you for meeting with us," she began. "Your father asked me to arrange this meeting because some irregularities have come to light regarding his estate planning documents." Michael's expression shifted to concern. Perfect. Practice concern. Irregularities? What kind of irregularities? Sarah slid a document across the table. "This codicil was filed with the provincial registry 6 months ago. It purports to significantly alter your father's will, but your father has no memory of signing it." I watched Michael's face as he picked up the document and began to read. Watched for the moment of recognition, the flash of panic, something. But he was good. He read through it carefully, his lawyer's training evident in the way he scanned the clauses, checked the signature, examined the notary seal. "This is obviously a forgery," he said finally, looking up at us. "Dad, this is identity theft. Have you filed a police report?" "Not yet," I said quietly. "I wanted to talk to you first." "To me? Why?" He looked genuinely confused. No, not confused. Offended. "You don't think I had anything to do with this?" Sarah intervened smoothly. "Michael, you're an estate lawyer. You're the primary beneficiary in your father's legitimate will. This forged codicil substantially increases your inheritance at the expense of the charitable provisions your parents established. You can understand why we need to ask difficult questions." "Difficult questions." Michael set the document down, his jaw tight. "You're accusing me of forging my own father's signature to steal from him. That's not a difficult question, Sarah. That's an insult." "I'm not accusing anyone," Sarah said calmly. "I'm stating facts and asking for your cooperation in getting to the bottom of this." "My cooperation." Michael stood up. "No. You know what? I don't have to sit here and be accused of criminal fraud by my dead mother's friend. Dad, if you really think I did this, then call the police. Press charges. But I'm not going to participate in whatever intervention this is." He moved toward the door, but I stood up, blocking his path. "Sit down, Michael." "Dad, this is ridiculous. They're poisoning you against me." "Sit down." Something in my voice stopped him. Or maybe it was something in my eyes. The tone I'd used with my graduate students when I caught them plagiarizing their dissertations. The tone that said, I know, and you know that I know. And now we're going to talk about what happens next. Michael sat. I returned to my seat, taking my time, letting the silence stretch. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app. I scrolled until I found the one I wanted. Michael, at 8 years old, gap-toothed grin, holding up a certificate from his elementary school science fair. First place in the physics category. Elizabeth and I had been so proud. You were 8 years old here, I said, turning the phone so he could see. You built a model of the solar system that actually rotated using motors and gears you'd figured out from one of my old engineering textbooks. You were so excited to explain it to me. You said you wanted to be like me when you grew up, an engineer, a professor, someone who builds things. Michael looked at the photo but said nothing. When did that change? I asked. When did you stop wanting to build things and start wanting to take them? Dad, I didn't forge that document. The notary whose seal appears on that codicil had her credentials stolen in a break-in 3 years ago. It was reported to the Law Society of Ontario. Any lawyer checking the registry could find that information, could verify that she's retired, that her seal is compromised. But it would take someone with access to legal databases to know about her in the first place, to know her seal could be used. You're reaching. Any number of people could have accessed that information. Agnes Wu was your mother's notary, I said quietly. She notarized the power of attorney Elizabeth signed when she was going into surgery for the cancer. You were there that day? You met Agnes? You would have her name, her seal number? Michael's face went very still. That's circumstantial. The handwriting analysis will come back from the expert Sarah hired, I continued. We'll know definitively whether you practiced my signature, whether you created this forgery, but I think we both know what that analysis will show. The silence in the room was absolute. Outside the windows, snow had started to fall, soft and silent, covering Toronto in white. Why? I asked finally. Just tell me why. Michael looked at his hands, at the table, anywhere but at me. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'm drowning, Dad. I've been drowning for 2 years and I didn't know how to tell you. Tell me what? The firm didn't let me go. They fired me for falsifying billable hours. I was desperate, behind on Emma's private school tuition, behind on the mortgage, behind on everything. Rebecca was threatening to leave me, to take Emma. I just needed to buy time. Rebecca, his wife, Emma's mother. I'd always liked Rebecca, though we'd never been particularly close. She was a marketing executive for a tech startup, ambitious and driven. I'd assumed their dual-income household was doing well. The startup Rebecca works for went under last year, Michael continued. They laid off everyone. She's been freelancing, but it's not enough. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The school sent Emma home with a letter last month saying if we don't pay the outstanding balance, she can't continue next semester. Michael, my voice was sharper than I intended. Why didn't you ask me for help? Because Mom's not here anymore. It burst out of him, sudden and raw. Because when Mom was alive, I could talk to you both about money, about problems, and it felt okay. But after she died, every time I came to you for help, I felt like I was failing her, like I was proving I couldn't make it without her safety net. I'm 40 years old, Dad. I have a law degree. I shouldn't need my father to bail me out. Sarah started to speak, but I held up a hand, stopping her. So instead of asking, I said slowly, you decided to forge my signature and steal from the charities your mother devoted her life to. The Heart Disease Research Foundation she helped establish. The scholarship fund for students who can't afford medical school. You decided to take money meant to save lives and use it to maintain your lifestyle. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was panicked. Rebecca found out about the firing and she lost it. She said if I didn't fix our financial situation immediately, she was taking Emma and moving back to Vancouver to live with her parents. I needed to know the money was there. That I could access it if I absolutely had to. You needed to know you could steal from me. I never actually planned to use it. I thought if I could just have it available as a backup plan, if things got desperate, then I wouldn't feel so trapped. And maybe Rebecca would stay if she knew we had resources. Michael, Sarah's voice cut through the room like a knife. You do realize what you're saying? You're admitting to document forgery and attempted fraud. Everything you're saying right now can and will be used against you in criminal proceedings. He looked at her, then at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Dad, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I didn't actually take any money. The codicil was never enacted. Doesn't that count for something? You're asking if attempted theft is better than actual theft, I said. Is that really where we are? I'm asking if you can forgive me. His voice broke. I'm asking if there's any way back from this. I looked at my son and saw him clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. Not the successful lawyer I'd assumed he was. Not the devoted father and husband, but a man who'd been terrified and desperate and had made the worst possible choices in response to that fear. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if there's a way back from this. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Sarah spoke, her voice softer than before. Michael, I'm going to give you some advice as someone who's known you since you were a child. You need to get a criminal defense lawyer, not an estate lawyer, not a corporate lawyer, someone who specializes in fraud cases. This isn't going away. Will you press charges? Michael asked me. I looked at Sarah. She met my eyes and I saw the question there. The decision was mine. I need time to think, I said finally. I need to understand the scope of this, whether there are other documents, other schemes I don't know about. Sarah is going to conduct a full forensic review of my finances. If we find anything else. There's nothing else. I swear, Dad, this was the only time. Your promises don't mean much to me right now, Michael. He flinched as if I'd struck him. Good. He should feel that. He should feel every bit of the pain he'd caused. Rebecca doesn't know, he said quietly. Emma doesn't know. Please, whatever you decide, can we keep this between us? You want me to protect your reputation while you were trying to steal from me? I want my daughter to still have a grandfather. I want her to keep calling you on Sundays to tell you about piano lessons. Please, Dad. However angry you are at me, don't punish her. That was the first thing he'd said that reached me. Emma, 8 years old, innocent. She didn't deserve to lose her grandfather because her father was a criminal. I'm not promising anything, I said. But I won't say anything to Emma until I decide what to do. That's all you get. Michael nodded, defeated. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. I love you, Dad. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do. And I loved Mom. I never would have done this if she were still alive. That's supposed to make it better? That you only became a thief after your mother died? He didn't answer. He just left, the door closing behind him with a soft click. I sat in the silence of Sarah's office, feeling every one of my 68 years. My chest ached. Not a heart attack, just grief. Just the physical weight of betrayal settling into my bones. What do I do now? I asked Sarah. She came around the desk and sat in the chair Michael had vacated. First, we secure everything. I'll start the forensic review tomorrow. We'll change all your passwords, put fraud alerts on your credit, move your assets into structures Michael can't access. Then you decide whether to press charges. If I don't press charges, he'll do it again. Maybe. Or maybe this scared him straight. I can't tell you what's in his heart, Robert. Only you can make that call. Elizabeth would know what to do. Maybe. Or maybe she'd be just as lost as you are. This isn't a medical diagnosis with a clear treatment protocol. This is your son, your only child. There's no textbook for this. I nodded, too exhausted to argue. Go home, Sarah said gently. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow about next steps. For now, you did the hardest part. You confronted him. You heard the truth. That took courage. Courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like survival. Like putting one foot in front of the other because the alternative was collapsing completely. I left Sarah's office and stepped out into the snow. It was coming down harder now, accumulating on the sidewalks, muffling the city sounds. I walked without direction, just moving, letting the cold air clear my head. Somehow I ended up at the university campus. The building where I'd taught for 35 years was lit up against the gray afternoon, students hurrying between classes, their young faces full of purpose and possibility. I'd been like them once. Elizabeth had been like them. We'd believed in building things, in contributing to the world, in leaving something behind that mattered. What was I leaving behind? A son who'd tried to steal from me. A granddaughter who would eventually learn the truth. A legacy of fraud and broken trust. No, that's not what I was leaving behind. That's what Michael had chosen. I was still here. I still had choices. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. "File the police report," I said when she answered. "Do the forensic review. If there's any evidence of other crimes, I want to know." And Sarah set up a meeting with Rebecca, Michael's wife. She deserves to know what her husband tried to do. "Are you sure about that, Robert? Once you tell Rebecca, the marriage is probably over." "The marriage is already over, if it's built on lies and desperation. She has a right to know who she's really married to. And Emma has a right to a parent who isn't drowning in secrets." "All right, I'll arrange it. Anything else?" "Yes. The scholarship fund Elizabeth and I established, I want to expand it. Double the endowment. I want more students to benefit from it. That's the legacy I want to leave, not whatever mess Michael has made of his life. I'll draft the papers." I hung up and stood there in the snow, watching the students, thinking about Emma, my granddaughter. She'd be devastated when she found out. The grandfather she called every Sunday would become the grandfather who'd had her father arrested, or the grandfather who'd let her father get away with theft. Either way, I'd lose her, at least for a while. But maybe, if I was lucky, if I lived long enough, she'd understand someday. She'd understand that love isn't enabling someone's worst behavior. Love is holding them accountable, even when it breaks your heart, even when it costs you everything. Elizabeth would have understood that. She'd been tough when she needed to be, compassionate, but never soft. She'd held her medical students to impossible standards because she believed they were capable of meeting them. She'd pushed her patients to fight even when the odds were grim because she believed in their strength. I needed to believe in something now. Not in Michael's redemption, not yet, maybe not ever, but in my own strength, in my ability to survive this betrayal and still be the man Elizabeth had loved. The man who built things, the man who contributed, the man who didn't give up. The next week passed in a blur of legal meetings, police reports, forensic accountants poring over every financial document I'd signed in the past 5 years. They found 2 other irregularities. Small things. A check made out to Michael that I didn't remember signing. An authorization for a bank transfer. Nothing as significant as the forged codicil, but evidence of a pattern. Evidence that this had been going on longer than I'd thought. The detective assigned to my case, a middle-aged woman named Detective Morrison with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, sat me down in her office at the Toronto police station. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to be straight with you. We have enough evidence to charge your son with fraud, forgery, and identity theft. But you're the victim here. If you don't want to press charges, if you want to handle this privately as a family matter, that's your right. What would you do?" I asked her. "If it was your son?" She was quiet for a moment. "I have a daughter, 26. If she did something like this, it would destroy me. But I'd press charges. Because I love her. Because letting her face consequences is the only chance she'd have at becoming a better person. Protecting her from the law would just teach her she can get away with it." I nodded. "Then let's proceed with the charges. Are you sure? Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your son will have a criminal record. He could lose his law license. His marriage will probably end. Your granddaughter will find out eventually." "I'm sure. File the charges." Detective Morrison made a note on her pad. "All right. We'll bring him in for questioning this week. You should prepare for this to become public. Criminal cases are a matter of public record. Public." The thought made me feel sick. My colleagues at the university would know. The students who'd studied under me would know. Everyone would know that Robert Chen's son had tried to steal from him, that the nice Chinese family who'd lived in their neighborhood for 40 years was just as dysfunctional as everyone else. But Elizabeth and I had never cared much about appearances. We'd cared about integrity, about doing the right thing, even when it cost us. The call from Rebecca came 3 days later. Sarah had met with her, told her everything. Now, Rebecca wanted to see me. We met at a coffee shop near her office building, neutral territory. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, her usual polished appearance replaced by jeans and an oversized sweater. She'd lost weight. The stress was eating her alive. "I didn't know," she said as soon as we sat down. "Robert, I swear to you, I didn't know any of this." "I believe you. He told me your estate was being settled, that you'd agreed to advance some of his inheritance to help us with Emma's school. I thought it was legitimate. I thought you'd offered to help us." "Rebecca, you don't have to explain anything to me. You're not responsible for Michael's choices. But I am responsible for what happens next. To Emma, to our family." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I'm filing for divorce. I've already contacted a lawyer. I can't stay married to someone who would do this, who would lie to his own father, who would forge documents, who would... I can't. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. Michael did. And I've been making excuses for him for too long. The billable hours thing, I knew something was off. I knew, and I didn't push him on it. I told myself he was stressed, that he'd figure it out. I enabled this. You didn't enable fraud. Michael made his own choices. Will Emma still be able to see you? After the divorce? I don't want her to lose you because of what Michael did." That question broke something in me. Of course, Emma is always welcome. She's my granddaughter. None of this is her fault. "Thank you." Rebecca's voice shook. "I need to tell her something. She knows something's wrong. She heard us fighting. What do I say?" I thought about it. About Emma's Sunday phone calls. About her piano lessons and her friends and her innocent view of the world. About how learning this truth would change her. Tell her Grandpa and Daddy had a disagreement about grown-up things. Tell her sometimes adults make mistakes and have to face consequences. Tell her you love her and I love her and nothing will change that. When she's older, when she can understand better, then you can tell her the details. And if she asks to see Michael, that's between you and your lawyer. I won't interfere with your custody arrangements. We sat in silence for a moment. Two people whose lives had been irrevocably changed by someone else's choices. "Elizabeth was good to me," Rebecca said finally. "When Michael and I first got married, I was intimidated by her. This brilliant surgeon, this force of nature. But she was kind. She made me feel like I belonged in your family. I wish she were here now. She'd know what to do. She'd tell you to protect Emma first, everything else second. That's what I'm trying to do." We finished our coffee and said goodbye in the parking lot. I watched Rebecca drive away and felt the weight of it all settling on me. Michael would be arrested soon. His marriage was over. Emma would grow up in a broken home, knowing her father was a criminal. And I would grow old alone, without the son I'd raised, without the happy family holidays, without the simple joy of Sunday phone calls where Emma told me about her week. This was the price of integrity. This was what doing the right thing cost. The hearing was set for December 15th. Winter had fully arrived in Toronto, the city blanketed in snow, Christmas lights going up despite everything. Michael appeared with his defense attorney, a sharp-looking woman who'd clearly been briefed on the case. He pleaded not guilty initially, but his lawyer asked for a recess to discuss a plea arrangement. I sat in the courtroom waiting room with Sarah, watching people come and go. Families torn apart by crimes and consequences. Lives derailed by bad choices. I was just one more story in an endless parade of human weakness and failure. Finally, Michael's lawyer approached us. "My client is willing to plead guilty to fraud and forgery in exchange for the identity theft charges being dropped. He's also willing to complete a restitution program and accept probation with community service. No jail time." "No," I said before Sarah could respond. "That's not enough." The lawyer looked startled. "Mr. Chen, with all due respect, your son is willing to admit guilt and take responsibility. Jail time would destroy his career, his ability to support his daughter. His career is already destroyed. He forged my signature. He tried to steal from charities. I'm not interested in making this easy for him." "Dad." Michael appeared behind his lawyer, his face drawn. "Please, think about Emma. If I go to jail, she'll have to visit her father in prison. Is that what you want for her?" What I want is for you to face real consequences. Not probation, not community service. Real consequences. Robert, Sarah said quietly, can we talk privately for a moment? We stepped aside. Sarah kept her voice low. I understand you're angry, but ask yourself what you're really accomplishing here. Michael going to jail doesn't undo what he did. It doesn't get you your trust back. It just destroys what's left of your family. Maybe my family is already destroyed. Is it? Or is there still a chance, maybe years from now, for you and Emma to have a relationship, for Michael to actually become a better person? Jail doesn't rehabilitate people, Robert. It just hardens them. I looked through the window of the courtroom, at the judge's bench, at the Canadian flag hanging on the wall. All my life, I'd believed in systems, in rules, in justice. But what was justice here? Vengeance or mercy? Were they the same thing or opposites? What would the plea deal include? I asked. Sarah consulted with Michael's lawyer. 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling. He surrenders his law license voluntarily. He pays restitution for all court costs and legal fees. And most importantly, he has no contact with you or access to your financial information for the duration of the probation. And if he violates any part of the agreement, then he goes to jail. Automatic. No second chances. I looked at Michael, standing with his lawyer, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not my son, the successful attorney. Not my son, the confident father. Just a frightened man who'd gambled everything and lost. One more condition, I said. He continues the therapy, not just during probation, ongoing. And he allows Rebecca to share updates with me on his progress. I want to know he's actually working on himself, actually trying to change. Dad, yes, whatever you want, thank you. Don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness, Michael. This is me trying to protect Emma from having to grow up visiting her father in prison. This is me hoping you'll prove you're capable of change. But I don't trust you. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. And until you give me reason to believe you've actually become a different person, you're a stranger to me. He nodded, his eyes wet. I understand. The plea deal was accepted. Michael would be sentenced to 5 years probation, community service, mandatory counseling. He surrendered his law license in open court. The judge's words echoed through the room. Your actions betrayed not just your father's trust, but the trust of your profession. You used your legal knowledge to commit fraud. That's an abuse of the privilege you were granted when you took your oath as an attorney. Michael accepted the judgment without argument. Then it was over. He left the courtroom with his lawyer, with Rebecca waiting outside to drive him home. To what home? I didn't know. That was no longer my concern. Sarah and I walked out into the winter afternoon. The sun was setting early, painting the snow orange and pink. How do you feel? She asked. Empty, relieved, guilty, all of it at once. That's normal. You did a hard thing today. Did I do the right thing? Only time will tell. But you did what you thought was right. That's all any of us can do. I nodded and looked up at the sky, at the first stars appearing. Elizabeth and I used to look at the stars from our back deck, wrapped in blankets, talking about our day. She'd point out constellations, tell me their stories. I'd make jokes about how romantic I was, dragging her outside in the cold. I miss her, I said. I know, Sarah replied. But she'd be proud of you, Robert, for facing this, for making the hard choice. I wanted to believe that. I chose to believe that. The months that followed were strange. Emma still called on Sundays, though our conversations were more careful now. She knew something had changed between me and her father, though Rebecca still hadn't told her the details. We talked about school, about piano, about her friends. Normal things, safe things. Michael sent me a letter 3 months into his probation, a real letter, handwritten, delivered through Sarah's office. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just described what he was learning in therapy, how he was starting to understand the patterns that had led to his choices, how he was working on rebuilding his life. He'd gotten a job at a legal aid clinic, helping low-income families navigate the system. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work. I didn't respond to the letter, but I kept it. The scholarship fund Elizabeth and I had established awarded its first set of grants in the spring. 3 students, all from low-income backgrounds, all brilliant, all passionate about medical research. I attended the award ceremony at the university and shook their hands and saw in their faces the same hunger to build something, to contribute something, to matter. This was the legacy that mattered. Not Michael's failures, not the family drama, but this, the continuation of what Elizabeth and I had started, the ripple effect of lives saved, discoveries made, futures created. After the ceremony, I walked through the campus one more time, past the engineering building where I'd taught, past the benches where Elizabeth and I used to meet for lunch between her surgeries and my lectures, past the student center where young people were studying, laughing, planning their lives. I thought about calling Michael, telling him about the ceremony, telling him that despite everything, I was still his father, that there might be a path back someday, if he kept working, kept trying, kept choosing better. But I wasn't ready yet. Maybe I'd never be ready, and that was okay too. I pulled out my phone and called Emma instead. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Grandpa. I was thinking about you today. How did your piano recital go?" Her voice bubbled through the phone, excited and innocent and whole. She told me about the Bach prelude she'd played, about how nervous she'd been, about how proud she'd felt when she finished without mistakes. "That's wonderful, Emma. I wish I could have been there. Mom said maybe you can come to the next one. In June. Will you come, Grandpa?" June. 6 months away. Who knew what would happen by then? Who knew if Michael would still be sober, still in therapy, still trying? Who knew if Rebecca's divorce would be finalized, if Emma would understand by then what her father had done? But I knew one thing. I'd still be here, still trying, still choosing to believe that the legacy Elizabeth and I had built could survive anything. Even this. "Yes," I told Emma. "I'll be there. I promise." And I meant it. Because that's what you do. You keep the promises you can keep. You show up for the people who deserve it. You build what you can with what you're given. And you trust that somehow, despite everything, it will be enough. It has to be enough. Because it's all we have.